Have you ever been in a discussion with someone and you were trying to resolve something with them, and all of a sudden they just shut you down and say, now I have to set a boundary with you? And it kind of catches you off guard and you're like, okay, so what's the boundary? But then there's no context and no explanation of what you did that required the boundary and what the new boundary is. But then you also feel like, that felt kind of hostile. It's very likely that this person you were communicating with isn't trying to set a boundary with you. This is a punishment that they are announcing. You're on punishment, and they're disguising it as a boundary. In this video, we're going to briefly go over what healthy boundaries are, what the purpose of healthy boundaries, and what is a boundary versus what is a boundary used as punishment. We'll also discuss some things you can do and say when you find yourself in a situation where you're trying to resolve a conflict with someone and they seem to be using boundaries as punishment. Boundaries are essential for maintaining healthy relationships. What they do is they define what is acceptable and what is unacceptable. A healthy boundary is communicated clearly, rooted in self-respect, and focused on personal well-being. A healthy boundary is not about controlling or punishing another person. When setting boundaries, it should be specific, clearly defining what is unacceptable and what you will do in response to unacceptable behavior. It should be consistent. Boundaries are not impulsive reactions. They are pre-established guidelines. Boundaries are about protecting your peace. They're not about punishing other people. A healthy boundary should allow for choice. The other person should have the option of engaging with you in a way that respects the boundary rather than feeling controlled by the boundary. So now we're going to talk about examples of boundaries versus punishment. And I am going to put a chart here below to give you a visual of what the difference is in each category of the purpose of a boundary. So the first one is the focus of the boundary. The focus of a healthy boundary is about preserving well-being and self-protection. The purpose of an unhealthy boundary or punishment is about retaliation or control. Communication of a healthy boundary is clear and respectful. Communication of an unhealthy boundary or a punishment is vague and emotional. The intent of a healthy boundary is future focused because it's intended to preserve the relationship, and it looks to the future. It looks to preserving interactions in the future so that the relationship can continue in a healthy way. The intent of an unhealthy boundary or a punishment is to make the other person suffer. The effect of a healthy boundary is it encourages understanding and it builds the relationship. The effect of an unhealthy boundary is it shuts down communication. It stops it in its tracks. It causes the communication to not be able to continue, so there's no resolution, causing the person who is using the boundary as punishment to escape from their own personal accountability. A healthy boundary has an outcome of mutual respect and mutual accountability. The outcome of a punishment or unhealthy boundary is manipulative or guilt-driven. So now here's an example of a healthy boundary being communicated versus an unhealthy boundary or punishment in communication. A healthy boundary may be communicated like this: I don't feel comfortable continuing this conversation when I'm being yelled at. If we can talk calmly, we can continue. But if not, I'm going to have to step away from this conversation for a little bit. The reason this is a healthy boundary and it's communicated in a healthy way is because it clearly states the issue, yelling or raising the voice. It provides a solution, speaking calmly, and it's about self-care, stepping away from the situation if the communication is harmful. A punishment disguised as a boundary sounds like the example I gave at the beginning of this video. Now I'm going to have to set a boundary with you. Or You made me do this. I'm cutting you off. That's it. You're done. I'm done with you. The reason why it's unhealthy or it's punishment is because it's vague and it's reactionary. It implies control. This is your fault because of what you did. Here are some red flags of unhealthy boundaries or punishments. They don't explain what the boundary is or why it's necessary. It's sudden, it's reactive. It happens impulsively and in anger rather than a thoughtful decision. It's used as a threat. It sounds like an ultimatum and used to shut down the conversation. Lack of accountability is another huge red flag. Instead of owning their feelings, they're blaming you for making them set a boundary. Here are some ways to respond if you find yourself in a situation where someone is disguising punishment as a boundary. If you want clarity, you can say, I understand you're setting a boundary. Can you please explain what that means for us going forward? If it feels unfair, you can say something like, I respect your right to set boundaries, but this feels like it's being used as a punishment rather than a decision that is about what is best for both of us. If they refuse to engage, you may just have to accept that some people use boundaries as a way to manipulate and control others. They're using this boundary as a way to avoid accountability and avoid conflict resolution. And it may not be worth pursuing any further. It might just be time to decide how you want to interact with this person going forward. And that would be you practicing your own self-care and your own personal boundaries as far as what type of behaviors you allow to continue. Healthy boundaries are about self-care and respect. They are not punishment or power plays. If you found this video useful, or if you have any other examples of a boundary being used as a punishment and you want to add that to the chat, comment on your experience, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And I hope this was helpful. Have a great day. Bye.